the Atma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma or fruitive activities. Let me read that one more time. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the indestructible transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma or fruitive activities. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Brahman is indestructible and eternally existing, and its constitution is not changed at any time. But beyond Brahman, there is Parabrahman. Brahman refers to the living entity, and Parabrahman refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. In material consciousness, his nature is to try to be the Lord of matter. But in spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation, by the force of material consciousness. In Vedic literature, the living entity is called Jivatma and Brahman, but he is never called Parabrahman. The living entity, or Jivatma, takes different positions. Sometimes he merges into the dark material nature and identifies himself with matter. And sometimes he identifies himself with the superior spiritual nature. Therefore, he is called the Supreme Lord's marginal energy. According to his identification with material or spiritual nature, he receives a material or spiritual body. In material nature, he may take a body from any of the 8,400,000 species of life. But in spiritual nature, he has only one body. In material nature, he is manifested sometimes as a man, a demigod, an animal, a beast, a bird, etc., according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs sacrifices or yagas, but when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth again in the form of a man. This process is called karma. The Chandogya Upanishad describes the Vedic sacrificial process. On the sacrificial altar, 5 kinds of offerings are made into 5 kinds of fire. The 5 kinds of fire are conceived as the heavenly planets, clouds, the earth, man, and woman. And the 5 kinds of sacrificial offerings are faith, the enjoyer on the moon, rain, grains, and semen. In the process of sacrifice, the living entity makes specific sacrifices to attain specific heavenly planets and consequently reaches them. When the merit of sacrifice is exhausted, the living entity descends to earth in the form of rain, then takes on the form of grains, and the grains are eaten by man and transformed into semen, which impregnates a woman, and thus the living entity once again attains the human form to perform sacrifice and so repeat the same cycle. In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. So the process of sacrifice is rain, grains, semen, man, women, baby. The human form to perform sacrifice, In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. The Krishna conscious person, however, avoids such sacrifices. He takes directly to Krishna consciousness and thereby prepares himself to return to Godhead. Impersonalist commentators on the Bhagavad Gita unreasonably assume that Brahman takes the form of Jiva in the material world. And to substantiate this, they refer to chapter 15, verse 7 of the Gita. But in this verse, the Lord also speaks of the living entity as an eternal fragment of myself. The fragment of God, the living entity, may fall down into the material world, but the Supreme Lord, Achyuta, never falls down. Therefore, this assumption that the Supreme Brahman assumes the form of Jiva is not acceptable. It is important to remember that in Vedic literature, Brahman, the living entity, is distinguished from Para Brahman, the Supreme Lord. Okay. Text number 4. O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called Adibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the supersoul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adi Yagya, the Lord of Sacrifice. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The physical nature is constantly changing. Material bodies generally pass through 6 stages. They are born, they grow, they remain for some duration, they produce some byproducts, they dwindle, and then they vanish. This physical nature is called Adibhuta. It is created at a certain point and will be annihilated at a certain point. The conception of the universal form of the Supreme Lord, which includes all the demigods and their different planets, is called Adidaivata. And present in the body, along with the individual soul, is the supersoul, a plenary representation of Lord Krishna. The supersoul is called Paramatma or Adi Yagya and is situated in the heart. The word Eva is particularly important in the context of this verse because by this word, the Lord stresses that the Paramatma is not different from him. The Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, seated besides the individual soul, is the witness of the individual soul's activities and is the source of the soul's various types of consciousness. The Supersoul gives the individual soul an opportunity to act freely and witnesses its activities. The functions of all these different manifestations of the Supreme Lord automatically become clarified for the pure Krishna conscious devotee engaged in transcendental service to the Lord. The gigantic universal form of the Lord called Adi Daivata is contemplated by the neophyte who cannot approach the Supreme Lord in his manifestation as Supersoul. The neophyte is advised to contemplate the universal form or the Virat Purusha, whose legs are considered the lower planets, whose eyes are considered the sun and moon, and whose head is considered the upper planetary system. Okay, well, this is usually beyond the understanding of most people. And why? Well, because the physical nature is constantly changing. So material bodies generally pass through 6 stages. They are born, they grow, they remain for some time, they produce some byproducts, they dwindle, and then they vanish. This physical nature is called Adibhuta. It is created at a certain point and will be annihilated at a certain point. The conception of the universal form of the Supreme Lord, which includes all demigods and their different planets, is called Adidaivata. And present in the body, along with the individual soul, is the supersoul, a plenary representation of Lord Krishna. Well, that is the statement that is most important for us. We are not alone in this body. Krishna is present in the body as the super soul, and he is helping us to make decisions. Now, if we listen to Krishna's instructions, which comes through the Vedic literature and the spiritual master, we can have a successful life. If we don't hear what the bona fide spiritual master says, that means that we will be misled and will become entangled unnecessarily in the karmic reactions of sinful life. So the only way to become free of that is to accept a bona fide spiritual master who can instruct us on how to avoid unnecessary sinful activities. All sinful activities are unnecessary, but some people take to them. Like, for example, someone decides to smoke. That's sinful. Why? Because you're putting smoke into your lungs. The lungs are not meant for inhaling smoke. It's supposed to be inhaling clean air. So when a person develops that type of a strange and very anti-health behavior, they're actually trying to kill themselves. Person, I mean, I remember my father. He was a chain smoker. He actually killed himself by smoking all the time. Couldn't stop. And when he was told to stop because he had a stroke and everything, he still secretly tried to smoke. So, yeah. Why? Because they were putting chemicals in the tobacco to get someone addicted to smoking. I'm not sure if they still do that, but it became common knowledge that the cigarette companies were putting chemicals in the tobacco to get people addicted to smoking. Okay, so unless we take up Krishna consciousness, we unnecessarily take up activities that are not conducive for a healthy life and a spiritual life. So people eat meat, people have illicit sex, people like to gamble, and people like to take intoxicants. All that is contrary to a healthy life, and therefore they unnecessarily suffer. Therefore, it's very important to follow the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. Always chant Hare Krishna, associate with devotees, hear regularly lectures given by genuine devotees, and if you can, you go out on Harinam Sankirtan. This is the spiritual path. The material path, of course, is engaging in sinful activities and activities that undermine our health and well-being. So, therefore, here it says, the super soul, who's in the heart of every living entity, gives the individual soul an opportunity to act freely and witnesses his activities. The functions of all these different manifestations of the Supreme Lord automatically become clarified for the pure Krishna conscious devotee engaged in transcendental service to the Lord? Well, if we're not engaged in the service of the Lord, then we don't understand what's happening to us. We don't understand what is our destiny. We become confused. Therefore, it says here, the super soul gives the individual soul an opportunity to act freely and witnesses his activities. The functions of all these different manifestations of the super soul automatically become clarified for the pure Krishna conscious devotee engaged in transcendental service to the Lord. So if we are engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, then we begin to understand the presence of the super soul in our heart and how the super soul is giving us knowledge and protection to make the right decisions in life. Okay. So any questions about that? This is an interesting verse and purport. Okay. No questions. Then we'll go on. This is chapter 8. Now, text 5. Antakali chamameva. Smaran mufat kalevaram. Ya prayati samad bhavam. Yati nasti atra samsaya. And whoever, at the end of his life, quits his body remembering me alone, in other words, quits his body remembering me alone, at once gains my nature. In other words, he's not thinking of anything else. He's only thinking of Krishna. At once maintains my nature. Of this, there's no doubt. Well, we have to be able to prepare ourselves for the end of life. We should be able to focus completely on Krishna and not have any other thought in our minds or in our activities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, the importance of Krishna consciousness is stressed. Anyone who quits his body in Krishna consciousness is at once transferred to the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the purest of the pure. Therefore, anyone who is constantly Krishna conscious is also the purest of the pure. The word smaran, remembering, is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Okay, that's because people develop bad habits, smoking, drinking, and taking marijuana, engaging in illicit sex, not at all interested in spiritual activities, and so forth. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life if one wants to achieve success at the end of his life. The process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree, Taror Eva Sahisnana. There may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, notice the word tolerating, very important. Tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, so that at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. Well, the end of one's life, we should chant Hare Krishna because we've been chanting Hare Krishna throughout our lives. We can't just start to chant Hare Krishna at the moment of death. if we haven't chanted it throughout our life. So it's absolutely necessary to always chant Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, and continue to do that right up to the end of one's life. Then one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. What is the full benefit of Krishna consciousness? Going back to Godhead. Okay, any questions? Any questions about these two verses that we have covered? So this chapter 8, text number 5 is a very nice verse. Antakali chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati samad bhavam yati nasti atra samsaya. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there's no doubt. When it says alone, there should not be any other thought than simply remembering Krishna. That can only happen if we're practiced always chanting Hare Krishna. It's not going to happen. You might say, well, I'll continue sinning and doing all my bad things, but at the moment of death, I'll chant Hare Krishna. It doesn't work like that. You have to be chanting your whole life so that at the moment of death, you can chant Hare Krishna. Remember Krishna. That's why it says, and whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone, in other words, not thinking of anyone else, only thinking of Krishna, at once attains my nature. This is no doubt. Well, to be able to do that, you have to be practiced the whole life. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. So in the purport, it says, remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree. Taror Iva Sahisnanam. There may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, so that at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. So, practice makes perfect. We should be always practiced to chant Hare Krishna every day, throughout the day, in fact, and even throughout the night, so that at the moment of death, we can remember Krishna and chant Hare Krishna. We shouldn't be, oh, where is my 401k? Oh, who's going to get my car? Oh, what's going to happen? No, we should only have one thought in our mind. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Just imagine how many people die thinking of so many mundane things. Their 401k, who's going to get their car, and what's going to happen to their wife, this thing, that thing. It's terrible. There was this one Mexican guy. He got hit by a bus because he was drunk walking across the street. And the last thing he said before he died was tequila, which is a liquor. So that was his consciousness. His consciousness was was focused on tequila, not on Krishna. So what happened to him? Well, he's going to take birth probably as a cockroach or something and have to go through all those different forms of living entities to come back to the human form again and have another chance. But why put yourself in such a precarious condition? It's better not to engage in illicit activities, meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, and always chant Hare Krishna and be happy. If a person does chant Hare Krishna, they become happy. They're not worried about anything because they know Krishna is in their heart. Krishna promises to protect his devotee. So they just continue chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. So an important takeaway here is, Prabhupada says, remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life if one wants to achieve success at the end of his life. The process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree. There may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So that at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness, which means going back to God. So this is a very important verse. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me, meaning Krishna, alone, me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So you should not be thinking of anything else except Krishna at the moment of death. But to do that, you have to be practiced to always be thinking of Krishna when in our healthy condition throughout life, so that at the moment of death, it's natural that we always remember Krishna. If we don't do that, then how are you going to remember Krishna at the moment of death? That's why Prabhupada has advised his devotees to chant minimum every day 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which takes about 2 hours to do. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. But that's the minimum. There's no maximum. You can go on chanting all day if you want. And that's why this verse says, Antakali chamam eva, smaran bhukva kalevaram, yaprayati samad bhavam, yatinasya trasamsayaha. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there's no doubt. So attains my nature, meaning attains spiritual world with Krishna. Haribol. Okay, so that is our takeaway today. Any questions or comments?
So this is the most important verse for the devotees, in a way, because that's at the time of death.
That's the moment where the real devotee is separated from the, let's say, sometime devotee. Yeah. We have to be practiced to be chanting Hare Krishna all the time, because practice makes perfect. So we should be always chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It should always be on our mind and our tongue. And That's why this verse, and whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So how can we remember only Krishna and nothing else at the moment of death? Well, always have to be chanting Hare Krishna throughout life. You can't say, well, I'll do whatever I want, but at the end of my life, I'll chant Hare Krishna. It's not going to work. It's not going to be like that. You can try, but it won't work.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the parakeet, the parrot. The parrot learns how to chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. But if someone grabs his neck, he goes, ah! Right? He doesn't say Hare Krishna, he goes, ah, like that. That's the same thing here. Unless we are practiced to always chant Hare Krishna, how are we going to remember Krishna at the moment of death? It's not going to happen. That's why it says, therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life, if one wants to achieve success at the end of his life. The process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree. In other words, very patient and very tolerant. There may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, so that at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness, which means to be able to go back to Godhead and see Krishna. And by the way, Krishna will be there at the door of Vaikuntha to shake your hand and say, Hare Krishna, you are welcome to enter.
I've been waiting for you.
Yeah, we've been waiting for you. Okay, well, that will be our takeaway for today. So our takeaway is remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of his life if one wants to achieve success at the end of his life. Well, listen, we might not be practiced from the beginning of this life, but from some point on, we should always be practiced in chanting Hare Krishna. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree. There may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So that at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. Haribol, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Are there any questions or comments? Whoa. Any questions or comments? Okay, no questions, no comments, no answers. Okay, then I will have my dinner. Haribol. Who made it? You made this, Mati?
Mataji. Yeah.
Jai. So it's spinach,
And golden beets, Maharaj.